Slaughter the laborers in their fields. Crossing of Agathians!
Chivalry 2 was one of the most popular sword fighting games of the last half a decade. You see, when the first one came out in 2012, it was raged with popularity. New medieval fans coming into the genre to find a game that nobody had ever tried before. First-person medieval combat based, well, on, like everything, a Half-Life mod. But as the sequel came out in 2022, it became even more popular. Because of the rise of Mordhau just a few years before, Chivalry 2 and its original developers Torn Banner needed to do something bigger. So they released bigger maps for more players, more game modes, and the huge sieges that I had never seen before. Pushing siege towers up to the walls, being able to throw chickens at other human beings, or getting pinned to palisades by brutal ballista bolts. And it was pretty goddamn successful. But in the last few years, Torn Banner promised that they'd double the size of the game. And they have done that with countless amounts of updates, from the first huge one in Galencourt.
Here we go. How's Galencourt? Are we defending or attacking? Oh, I'm in, and I've spawned as a class that I really don't want to spawn as. Brilliant. That's a good start.
So ready to be excited. Dead. All of them.
James, I've got a present. Oh, yes. I hit him on the head with an anchor. Run away!
Bringing out other things like Aberfall, of course, the Scottish map, which added in bees. Having the raiding party game modes, Reclamation, Duel of the Fates was the most recent one. And then we get Regicide.
Mulric! Argon, come. I will reunite you with your father. The reign of the Mason Order ends here, today, for Agatha!
Regicide came out in May, and it was more of a narrative conclusion to Chivalry 2, having, of course, the two sides of the Mason Order and the Agatha Knights. And it finished off what essentially was the content for the game. Torn Banner Studios came out today talking about how it was the final thing for Chivalry. They released a blog post saying that they were done with the game and no more updates would be released. Along with it, a look at everything had been released, from patch notes to adding in cavalry, additional maps, new arms and armors, and troops. Wait, what? No, no, it's not meant to end like this, please. I am now one of the peasants. It's what I've always wanted. Ooh, a plow. Hold on. Yes. Get down, son. Yes. Yes, get on the floor, son. You just been pitchforked. They said, "We've cherished the epic journey that we've taken with you over the past few years. With Chivalry 2, we set out to make the ultimate medieval battle game, an unparalleled multiplayer experience that realized our dream of being a warrior on the fields of battle, inspired by classic medieval movie scenes and old tales of glory from history." And it's safe to say they pretty much did that. We pledged to at least double the size of Chivalry 2 post-launch by adding in new maps, modes, weapons, features, and experiences to ensure that we had delivered a strong and lasting vision of the ultimate medieval battle game. And I actually think, despite my initial conclusion to Chivalry and Mordhau and the competition between them, that Chivalry 2 has managed to surpass the latter in pretty much every other way. In pretty much every way. But in terms of fun and hectic battles, boy, Chivalry 2 does that perfectly. It has incredible scripted events, along with AI and NPCs that you can mess around with, whether it's raiding parties and trying to capture peasants. It is a beautiful cacophony of blood, gore, and medieval fun. And that's where the main focus was. Such a refreshing thing to finally get a game that focused on fun more than anything else. Now, don't get me wrong, it did have its drawbacks. There was a lot of talk about cosmetics that kind of started to plague the game towards the mid to late end of its development, a lot of overpriced skins, and of course DLCs that were starting to weave their way into what we kind of expected to be a free content update. They had mentioned that they were going to double the game's content, and whilst they did do that, well, unfortunately there was a lot of paid stuff within that as well.
Hello. Hello, you're a friend. You're not a friend. Did you just see that? That was sick. Hello, old dirty snake. You are the leader of the enemy's team. You are my new nemesis. Oh, here he is. It's the one and only TBS Lee. Oh, I'm gonna die. I'm so gonna die. But he's gonna die first.
With the Regicide update, the one that came out in May, we consider the game to be content and feature complete. Though every story comes to an end, we know many players will be disappointed by the news, but this isn't the end for the Chivalry franchise. And this was what struck a chord with me. Something new was on its way. Another Chivalry game. Was it coming? With this final content update delivered to players, we're excited to focus our efforts and our resources on compelling new multiplayer projects, both in the Chivalry universe as well as within terrifying new co-op territory. We've been building our team in number and skill set to take on the following challenges, with a focused effort to ensure that when the next Chivalry title is released, it will utterly blow players away. Now, we will get onto the next Chivalry game because, I mean, it's all been but confirmed that it's coming. But what about that co-op game that they keep mentioning? Well, this was actually announced in some sort of form a few months ago. The trailer for No More Room in Hell 2. It's an 8-player co-op action horror experience, which is basically Left 4 Dead with Chivalry mechanics. Yeah, a zombie game focused on melee. I don't think I could think of anything goddamn better. Similar to games like Left 4 Dead, World War Z, or any other zombie shooter or co-op zombie shooter that you've ever played. But because of being, well, Torn Banner Studios, you know you're going to have those brutal axe kills. You're going to have more melee knife kills. And whilst there will be gunplay, that's definitely not going to be the focus. So that's going to be coming within the next couple years or so. So that's exciting. But what about the Chivalry franchise? What can we expect from that? Well, this is the first time that we've had any confirmation that there will be more games within it. Chivalry 2 was so far after the first game. In fact, it was a decade after Chivalry Medieval Warfare was released. And I also thought that Torn Banner weren't really going to do it because it had been so long. And whilst the first game was so successful, their next title just wasn't. Mirage Arcane Warfare released to disappointing reviews, it's safe to say. It was basically Chivalry, but within this, I don't know, Aladdin style of era. It was one of the most strange choices that actually had a lot of fun gameplay, mixing melee combat with archery and some projectile stuff, and of course magic, but it just didn't do very well. The player base never picked up, and I made multiple videos on it when it came out, but nobody was interested, I think, other than me and Mirage Arcane Warfare. Does anyone else even remember that game? But because of that game not being particularly successful, they moved on and they went silent for a while. And I guess that's when they were working on Chivalry 2. But because Chivalry 2 has been out for a number of years now, and because they've got to the end of their content development, it looks like we will be getting an announcement for a new one in terms of gameplay trailers or even just a reveal trailer within the next year or so, which I think is incredibly excited. In fact, we have Gamescom coming up, which is always the most exciting time for gaming, and that could be potentially where we hear. I mean, it can't be a coincidence that they're announcing the end of Chivalry 2 and the working on the next titles at the same time that Gamescom is about just round the corner. I think it is an important thing to state that they don't actually mention it's going to be Chivalry 3, but I don't think that means that's so far off. But one thing I think is important to mention is the talk about multiplayer projects, plural, both in the Chivalry universe as well as their new No More Room in Hell game. But what I think this means, we are going to get multiple more Chivalry games, or at least some that are planned. Chivalry 3, of course, will be in the pipeline at some point. I expect it's going to expand a lot of the Agatha Knights and the Mason Order, pretty much what we've seen through Chivalry 1 and the second one. But don't forget, Torn Banner aren't opposed to spin-off games. Does anybody remember The Deadliest Warrior? There was a TV show in the US a long time ago, pitting up different time eras and different heroes to fight against each other, using each of their stats to see who would be better on the battlefield, and at the end they do like a recreation. Anyway, it was incredibly satisfying to watch, and I loved it. But Torn Banner actually made a tie-in game with these guys called Chivalry Deadliest Warrior. It came out, it had Spartans against ninjas, medieval knights against Vikings, so on and so forth. It was pretty much the For Honor before the For Honor ever existed. And it wasn't that popular. In fact, it didn't do all that well and didn't get all that well reviewed. But what I think this means is we might get something similar within Chivalry or Chivalry 2, maybe even a full expansion or spin-off. The game itself is finished, but I don't see why they can't continue this universe with multiple different directions, having a bigger development team as they've already stated. I mean, it's very clear that the next Chivalry game or whatever is in the pipeline at this point in time has been worked on for quite some time now, alongside the updates for Chivalry 2, because, well, they've got No More Room in Hell just being announced, they've had Chivalry 2 being updated, and they're talking about working on their next Chivalry game, which means this team is big enough to be doing multiple projects at once now. So I don't think it's just going to be a Chivalry 3. There could be some spin-offs. What could it be? Well, I'd love them to go back to the Ancients. I'd love to see some gladiator-based combat. Imagine a Chivalry game where you're playing as a gladiator in the arena, having tournament-style events, 1v1s, 2v2s, even 5v5s, or even going up to 32 versus 32 in arenas. I think it would be absolutely fantastic playing as the Romans, but also being able to play as other different factions within this time. Just as the Romans would recreate battles within the arena themselves, having the Carthaginians versus Rome, having Scythians, having Gaul, having Dacians, being able to do that within Chivalry itself would be fantastic. Of course, that would mean changing the name, but I think that would be a really good idea for going on for their spin-off if that's something that they've got in the pipeline. But the one that we can pretty much trust is that Chivalry 3 is now a potential in the future. Hopefully it doesn't take quite as long to come out as Chivalry 2 did to the first game, and hopefully it can be even bigger before. They did mention that they're going to ensure that the next Chivalry title will blow players away, because, well, that's going to be their main focus, at least for the near future.